When Donald Trump announced his America First policy, it was more than a campaign slogan. It was a seismic shift in global politics. The U.S., long a key player in world affairs, signaled it was stepping back, focusing inward. For Africa, this was impossible to ignore. Suddenly, foreign aid and partnerships felt uncertain. The U.S. pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord and threatened to cut WHO funding, moves that hit Africa hard. The message, Africa, you might be on your own. Add to that some undiplomatic language calling African countries shithole countries, and it was clear Africa wasn't a priority. The shock quickly turned to reflection. African leaders and citizens began asking, should we keep relying on distant powers? The answer? It's time to be pro-Africa. The continent started looking inward, realizing it needed a new strategy for a changing world. This was a wake-up call. Africa needed to stand together. The seeds of a new era were planted. Did Africa retreat? Not a chance. Instead, there was a surge of unity and determination. Leaders talked more, citizens demanded more, and the focus shifted to what Africans could do together. Pan-Africanism gained new urgency. Made in Africa became a movement, not just a slogan. The goal: create jobs, build resilient economies, protect natural resources, and reduce dependence on foreign aid. The real game changer, the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. Over 50 nations agreed to create a massive free trade zone, making it easier for African businesses to trade across borders. This was about breaking colonial-era barriers and building Africa's own economic superhighway. The AfCFTA sent a clear message. Africa is open for business. With itself. The continent was ready to write its own success story. America First had sparked Africa First. Big ideas are great, but real change happens on the ground. In 2018, Rwanda, for example, stood firm against U.S. pressure and prioritized its own textile industry, banning second-hand imported clothing. Ghana innovated with a gold-for-oil policy, using its own resources to solve economic challenges. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Africa faced vaccine shortages as wealthier nations hoarded doses. The response? Countries like South Africa, Senegal, and Rwanda began building their own vaccine manufacturing capacity. The message, never again would Africa be left behind. Grassroots movements like Nigeria's #EndSARS showed young Africans demanding accountability and change from within. These stories are proof Africa is resilient, creative, and determined to shape its own future. Across the continent, a new spirit of self-reliance was taking hold. Innovation wasn't just policy, it was a mindset. Africa was no longer waiting for solutions from outside. The continent is building its own path. These moves show a clear trend towards self-reliance and intra-African cooperation, and mark a new era of African innovation and unity. The world is starting to notice. The shift wasn't just internal. Africa began rethinking its global relationships. West African nations like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger started distancing themselves from old colonial ties, especially with France. The focus turned to equal partnerships both within Africa and with new global players. Regional bodies like ECOWAS and the African Union gained importance. Morocco, for example, invested across the continent, showing the power of South-South cooperation. Africa's greatest opportunities were increasingly found within its own borders. Countries like Ethiopia, Egypt, and Senegal broadened their diplomatic horizons, engaging with Asia, the Middle East, and emerging economies. The goal: a balanced portfolio of partnerships less dependent on any single bloc. Africa was stepping onto the global stage on its own terms. The continent was no longer a passive player, it was setting the agenda. This was smart, confident diplomacy in action. Here's the twist. America First, meant to put the U.S. above all, ended up sparking a wave of unity and ambition across Africa. Instead of weakening the continent, it pushed African nations to look inward and accelerate integration. The message, "You're on your own," became a rallying cry. Watch us build something incredible. Africa's young generation led the charge. Entrepreneurs, activists, and innovators determined to shape their own future. They saw opportunity, not limitation. Africa First became a movement of pride and self-determination. The story isn't about Africa being left behind, it's about Africa rising. Trump's policies, whatever their intent, became a catalyst for African unity and progress. The journey continues, but the direction is clear. Africa is standing tall, on its own terms. We must dare to invent the future. Thomas Sankara. This is Africa. History, present and future. Subscribe and rise with us.